The scent of warm porridge drifted through the air, gentle and comforting, as if someone was softly whispering, trying to awaken long-forgotten memories buried deep within me. It wasn't sharp or overwhelming, just the faint aroma of ginger and scallions, yet it stirred my tightly shut eyes, pulling me back from what felt like a long slumber. I opened my eyes, slowly, disoriented. A soft golden light filtered through the wooden window frame, the kind of light that only appears in early autumn. The room was small, humble, evoking a place from long ago, far away. At the edge of the bed stood a boy, no older than 10, holding a steaming bowl of porridge. His hair was still wet, clinging to his forehead like he had just run through the rain. He placed the bowl on the table and quietly stepped back. Not a word, not a sound, but his eyes looked at me as if he'd known me forever. The woman sitting beside me said nothing either. She gently dabbed a warm cloth across my face, wiping away the dirt with a tenderness reserved for someone nursing a child back to health. In that moment, I didn't know who I was. All I could feel were her careful touches on my skin, awakening something deeper than memory. I once lived in gilded mansions and walked through grand halls where a single nod from me could change the fate of an entire company. But here, in this modest wooden cabin, with nothing more than a bowl of porridge and a warm towel, I felt small again, human again. There were no numbers, no balance sheets, just me, a body slowly healing, and hands caring for me without asking who I was. Then I saw it. On the table beside the bowl was an old handkerchief, faded grey, hand-stitched, with exquisite care. In one corner, a single letter, delicate but unmistakable. My heart froze. It was the same handkerchief I had once given to the woman I loved on that quiet day at the train station, back when I still had the courage to make promises I didn't yet know I would break. I swallowed hard. It was her. It was her right there before me, wiping my face with all the gentleness of someone who once loved deeply. But why? Why didn't she recognize me? Her gaze was calm, void of familiarity. I remembered. When we met, she was still undergoing treatment for her eyesight. Yes, she once struggled to see clearly, but now her eyes were crystal clear, perfect. That realization hit me like a blow. Could it be that even now, she still couldn't see me for who I once was? I turned to the boy. His face, his eyes, that forehead. Too familiar. As if someone had copied my childhood self. A chill ran down my spine. That boy. Could he be my son? I tried to sit up. Every small movement felt like my whole body was set ablaze. Each joint throbbed in pain as if I'd just been torn away from my own life and stitched back together with threads so fragile that a single breath could unravel them. The woman supported me gently without a word. She adjusted my pillow, tucked in the blanket, then turned to ladle the steaming porridge the boy had just brought. She didn't recognize me, or worse, she had forgotten. I watched her closely. Her hair was still smooth, and her eyes now sparkled with the very light I had once longed to see, the eyes that had once been blind. I had promised to stay by her side through it all. I had given her that little embroidered handkerchief with my name on it, a silent vow before I walked away, forced by my family's demands. 10 years had passed. How had she lived in those 10 years? And me, I had existed like a shadow in my own mansion until I plunged off that cliff and no one reached out a hand to save me. I glanced around the small room. Neat, clean, strangely simple. There was no sign of a man's presence. No shirts hung by the door, no lingering scent of cologne. Everything seemed to belong to just two people, a mother and her child. I spoke, my voice still hoarse. "What's your name?" The boy looked at me, a fleeting smile on his lips before he answered Evan. I froze. Evan, the very name I once said I'd choose if I ever had a son. It had been a casual joke made under the old porch back then, but now it struck me like thunder in my chest. I asked again, "Where is your father?" Evan looked at me for a moment, then replied softly, "I don't know. Mum says he's a good man. He just disappeared." Disappeared. A word that sounds gentle, but landed in my heart like the weight of a mountain collapsing. I had disappeared. Without explanation, without keeping a single promise. The woman returned, setting the bowl of porridge in my hands. She looked at me, but didn't truly see me. Her voice was soft, like the breeze of early winter. "Eat something. You need your strength." No anger, no blame, just a quiet sadness, as if she had grown used to the fact that the people who matter always leave without warning. Looking at her, I understood. I hadn't just fallen off a cliff. I had fallen out of her heart, out of the place I was meant to protect for a lifetime. But the handkerchief remained. The name Evan remained. And her gaze, though void of resentment, still carried a flicker of something not yet extinguished. Maybe I had lost everything, but I still had a chance to win it back. And before I could reclaim her and my son, I had to find the truth. Because that accident, it was no accident at all. It was a plan. And someone, or perhaps more than one person, was counting on me, never coming back. As night fell, the boy had already drifted into deep sleep, on the old sofa, pushed against the wall. The woman was cleaning in the kitchen, every movement slow and quiet, so quiet that I could hear the faint clink of a spoon against a ceramic bowl. I lay motionless, but my mind was no longer in that room. Memories surged like a storm. The car losing control that afternoon, the sound of metal scraping against rock the moment I tumbled off the cliff's edge. It wasn't an accident. I knew that, with certainty. The brakes had been tampered with. The GPS is disabled. My phone vanished. No one truly searched for me, just a few half-hearted news reports and some hollow condolences from people who smiled in my face and sharpened knives behind my back. My assistant Brandon was the last to touch the car. My younger brother Scott was the first to sign the papers for temporary control of my assets after I disappeared. And the board of directors, they didn't even bother to hide their eagerness at the thought of clearing me from their path. I closed my eyes. A chill crept down my spine. Everything I had built, the empire, passed down from my father and grandfather, was now in the hands of those who didn't deserve it. Wealth could be regained, but trust, loyalty, family, when did I start living among people who waited for my downfall? I turned to look at the woman at the sink, the one who had once been the only light in my chaotic youth. She hadn't asked about me. She hadn't pried into my pain. She simply cared for me as if I were a stranger. But it was that very silence that stirred something deep inside me. She didn't need to ask questions. Her eyes and her quiet presence were a silent reminder of what I had lost. And now, as the truth began to reveal itself, I knew I couldn't stay lying here any longer. I had to rise. I had to confront everything. I had to return, not for revenge, but to reclaim what rightfully belonged to the woman standing at that sink, and to the boy sleeping nearby. Not because I'm a billionaire, but because I'm a father, a man who once made mistakes. But he is still clear-headed enough to make things right. I pretended to sleep the entire next morning, but in truth, my mind never stopped racing. Every footstep, every small sound in the house was quietly recorded in my head. Not out of suspicion, but after too many betrayals, I no longer allowed myself the luxury of lowering my guard. The woman Emma still treated me, with that same familiar tenderness, a kindness free from any trace of calculation. But the more I received that unconditional care, the more I realized I couldn't keep pretending. Once the boy left for school, I struggled to sit up and finally spoke to Emma. "My name is Ethan Caldwell," I said softly, my eyes fixed on the grey cloth hanging near the fireplace, the very handkerchief I had once given her on that fateful day when I was forced to walk away from her because of class differences and a family that never accepted her. I never thought fate would bring me back here, like this. But maybe this is the chance I lost 10 years ago. Emma was silent for a long while. She wasn't surprised. Deep down, it seemed she had always known. Those eyes, the ones now crystal clear after the surgery years ago, looked at me without blame, without anger. Only quiet sorrow remained, as if she had learned how to live, without needing any explanations. "My son's name is Leo," she whispered. "He doesn't know who his father is. I thought I could forget you, but every time I looked into his eyes, I saw a piece of yours. I don't blame you. I just hoped you were still alive." I lowered my head. Whatever strength I had vanished in that moment. "I wanted to find you. I did, but I made the wrong choice. And now, after losing everything, the only thing I want to hold on to, the only thing that might save me from the abyss, is you and our son." Silence filled the room, but this time it wasn't heavy. It felt like the quiet rhythm of two hearts, once intertwined, now sitting across from each other in a modest kitchen, where the truth no longer needed to be spoken aloud. I knew I had to return to the world I came from, but this time I wouldn't return alone. I had a reason. I had a real family, and I would never let anyone take that away from me again. 2 weeks later, I left that little house in silence, leaving behind a note for Emma and Leo. "Wait for me. This isn't over." Returning to the city, looking like a man who had just escaped death, I stepped into the mansion that once was my home. But now, it was just a hollow shell of a life eroded by greed and deceit. The one at the helm of the company now was my nephew Brandon, the same man who used to call me uncle, with feigned respect. He was the one behind the accident. He now sat in the chair I once occupied, treating the family fortune as his own and preparing to merge the company with a foreign conglomerate just to cash out the dividends quickly. I didn't go to the press. I moved quietly, seeking out those who still had loyalty, left the old chauffeur, my former assistant, even the gardener who had been dismissed without reason. They helped me gather the evidence. Suspicious money transfers, forged contracts, and most importantly, an audio recording from the night of the crash, a phone call Brandon thought no one had captured. But the sound technician had kept it, and after hearing I was still alive, he sent it to me. Piece by piece, I assembled it all like fractured bones, slowly knitting back together. But I knew evidence alone wouldn't be enough. I needed a reason for the public to stand with me, and I had something Brandon didn't, a true story. A woman who had been abandoned, a boy who never knew who his father was, and a man, after all his mistakes, returns to make things right, not for reputation, but for love. Just as I was preparing to release the truth, someone appeared at my gate. Emma, holding Leo in her arms, her face tight with worry. "We have a problem," she said. "Someone's been asking about you, and about him." I knew then. The real fight was only just beginning. But this time, I wasn't fighting alone. I had a family, I had the truth, and I had a reason to win. They say that when the truth rises, it doesn't need to shout. Just a single look, a single word, is enough to silence an entire room. And in the moment I stepped into the shareholders' meeting with Emma and Leo by my side, Not a soul spoke, but every pair of eyes was drawn to us as if pulled by a force they couldn't resist. Brandon shot to his feet, forcing a smile. "Uncle, you really survived. We searched everywhere." "Searched everywhere," I interrupted, my voice calm, composed. "Or were you just searching for a way to erase me so you could clear your path to that chair?" Behind me, the large screen lit up. One by one, the evidence appeared: illicit transfers, forged documents, the audio recording from the night of the accident. My voice confused and alarmed as the car spun out of control, and Brandon's voice cold and calculated, speaking into the phone. "Make sure he doesn't survive. One wrong turn, a lifetime of luxury." The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Cameras clicked on reporters had been invited ahead of time. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to accuse. The truth carried its weight. Emma took my hand as I stood before them and declared, "I will reclaim every share that was manipulated. And my heir will not be the traitors you see here today. My heir is my son, Leo." One by one, they stood, heads bowed, as if waking from a long, shameful trance. Brandon was handcuffed on the spot, his expression frozen, still stuck somewhere between shock and despair. I knelt beside Leo. He didn't understand everything, not yet. But in his eyes, I saw trust. And Emma, the woman once left behind in the shadows, now stood with me beneath the brilliant light of truth. This wasn't just a redemption. It was the first time the three of us reached out together and touched the future, the one that had always been meant for us. The next morning, the doors of the Carter Foundation opened for the first time since the scandal broke. But this time, it wasn't the hurried footsteps of financial advisors or the parade of ambitious faces entering. It was the steady, deliberate steps of a man who had returned from the brink of death, with the woman he once left behind and the son he had never held in his arms. Emma stood beside me, wearing a simple white dress. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried an ocean of emotion. She wore no jewelry. She needed no praise. Just by standing there beside me, she made the entire hall fall silent. I stepped up to the podium, the spotlight shining directly into my face. I used to think I had to choose between reputation and love. And I was wrong. Reputation didn't keep me from the abyss, but love brought me back. The entire room held its breath. I reached out my hand to Leo. He stepped forward, his hand trembling, but his gaze lifted high. "This is my son, my flesh and blood. And from this day forward, everything that bears the Carter name will carry his name into the future." I turned to Emma. "I once abandoned you. Not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't dare to fight the world for you. You don't need to forgive me, but I will spend the rest of my life protecting you and our son." Emma didn't cry, but when she placed her hand over mine, every silent wound began to heal. That day, there was no thunderous applause, only a sacred resonant silence. A woman once left in the shadows now became the heart of an empire, and a nameless child now carried the legacy of 3 generations. Ethan, Emily, and Jacob moved to a quiet suburb outside San Francisco, a place free from the weight of wealth, where only love and second chances remained. Ethan stayed on as an advisor at the company, and Jacob, just 10 years old, was already being gently guided to one day lead with kindness and humanity. Emily was no longer the woman who had been left behind. She was now the woman powerful enough to turn an entire dynasty around. The once cold mansion now echoed with the laughter of a child. Leo ran through the backyard, clutching a paper airplane folded by his father's own hands. Emma sat under the porch, the afternoon sun catching her hair, her face glowing, still serene, just as she had been. The day she quietly nursed back a man who lay motionless in a wooden cabin, forgotten by the world. I stepped outside and watched them. There were no more remnants of regret, no more unhealed wounds. Only one truth remained, one that could no longer be hidden. I was once the man who walked away, but the woman I abandoned, she was the one who saved me in every sense of the word. I had to lose everything to learn that a man's greatest legacy isn't a billion-dollar empire or a skyscraper bearing his name. It's the woman who wiped his face when he couldn't utter a word. It's the son whose eyes reflect the mistakes he once made. It's family, the thing most people lose in the pursuit of power, but that for me became the center of everything. They once didn't know who Emma was. They mocked her, called her a leech, a relic best forgotten. But every single one of them, every name behind the accident, every person who once lined up to claim a piece of my fortune was quietly and completely removed. The legacy I spent 30 years building would not be left to traitors. It would be entrusted to the only person who saw me when I had absolutely nothing left to give. And if someone were to ask me why her, I could only say, because in a world that had shattered around me, she was the only one who didn't need me to be powerful to believe I was worthy of love. A simple woman, abandoned for 10 years. And when I returned, she didn't ask for revenge. She just wanted me to still be myself. And for that, she deserves everything. Do you believe that sometimes the ones we leave behind are the very ones who protect the best parts of who we are? If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Toch Story so you don't miss the most emotional, powerful journeys yet to come.